Alright guys, got another little quick devlog for everybody today to show some new progress that I made and sort of explain where we're going with this game right now. So first things first, I wanted to note, you probably see here on the screen that things do look very different than what I had before. The first reason why was my other project that I had been working in had some sort of a weird bug that hit it, and I just couldn't figure out how to fix it. I had made a lot of progress. I had been able to build things to a certain point that I was excited to see where it was at, but everything fell apart. I couldn't revert things, couldn't go back to a previous commit to get things to work right. So I basically had to take all that I did in that and convert it over to this new project. Now this new project is also one that I built and set up for our cloud, so our organization, everybody in the teams can be able to access it and use it as well, where the other one was locally on my machine. So that, was a good action. But you'll also notice that this one looks very, different in terms of the fact that I now have sprite characters that I'm using as opposed to others. Now these are just some sprites that I got online for free, just as placeholders while we're still developing and designing the appearance of the characters that we want in this. But it's kind of a general idea that we're wanting. We're wanting to have a 2D sprite character that is your character in a 3D world, so you can move around, shoot and attack and do stuff in the 3D world, but everything is going to be two-dimensional elements for the purposes of, we want to be able to have them look like little two-dimensional characters. So in this one, I kept things fairly basic so far in the sandbox, just to test out, because there's still some further work I need to do. In the other one, I had the enemy respond and have an artificial intelligence scripts. I don't have that currently in this one, but I will be building that out. I'm going to be building it out a little differently than how I was doing before. Before I was doing it in such a way, I was following some guides from other videos, stuff like that, but I didn't like the way that they were doing things and how things were being put together. It was very complex for what I truly am aiming for. So we're going to have a variety of different enemy type characters that'll respond to events and do things very differently and attack very differently. So we will get there, but as for right now, the enemy does not respond, doesn't do anything right now. It just takes damage and dies. Now, one thing you'll notice as well, here's my enemy over here, the parent. I've got the enemy sprite character right here. Now, what I've done to be able to help work things here, because I know on my enemy I want to have it have aggro. I want to have it be able to say, okay, when somebody's within this range, you're triggered, go attack them. If you see somebody, do this. If you do, stuff like that. But I found in my other one, as soon as I built stuff like this, it was affecting the gunshots. The triggers were killing the character whether they shot through anywhere in these colliders, which I didn't want to have happen. So in this one, you'll see I've got the upper enemy parent class, which will do what it does, and that is, if my character gets within a certain range, the enemy will recognize him and respond as such, an attack. However, I needed to have this not take damage. So I've got it on the ignore raycast layer, the parent here. And that way, when I shoot, it's going to be going through this collider and ignore it. It's not going to respond. However, I still need the enemy to have a collider, so when I hit the enemy is going to die. And that's where I have the enemy sprite on this lower layer. I have it just on the default layer currently, but you'll see it's also got its own sphere collider here that it's using. So if I hit that, it's going to work. Now, why a sphere collider instead of something flat like a plane or something like that? Well, because this is a 3D world, so I need to have the shots still act as if they're 3D. So I'm creating the sphere collider around this guy so it matches his shape no matter what. Now, eventually what I'm going to have is I'm going to have all of the enemy characters doing the look at script, and so I'm going to have them do the look at, so they're constantly looking at the camera. So, very much so like old-fashioned 3D games where they had like a 2D character moving around, and that character always seemed to be looking at the camera. That's very much so what's going to happen here. And that's kind of the goal that we want to have. We want to have it be a silly little world where these little sprite characters are, you know, fighting in this little tiny war on paper. One of the big things, though, you'll see is, you know, we're not trying to go super realistic with this game. That's not the point here. Maybe someday we'll work into some of those games, but we want to have it be a fun, just playful game that has a bunch of fun game modes and a playful story mode that is silly, just a silly paper war kind of thing going on. So that's why you have a lot of things going here. Now, I will be building out this sandbox more and more to allow for some more types of scenarios, options, getting the enemy class figured out. That's going to be my next project, taking care of the enemy so you can actually have it work the way it needs to, have it shoot and do things. And then I'm going to use this enemy base class that I have to build out some polymorph classes so I can have multiple different types of enemies that do different types of things. And then once that's done, we'll start building into the main character here a way for it to have or carry 2 different weapons and swap out weapons and things like that. And then when the enemies die, they'll drop their class's weapon and things like that, so you'll be able to switch things out. We'll start working out those things here. So it's coming along a lot more than it did before. Now, I'm going to show you some gameplay that I've got going so far. Right now, the features of gameplay that we have is we've got our player character. I do need to switch this. Oh, never mind. That's character controller. That's not a collider. Sorry. Forgot about that. So we have our player character here. The player character down here, I'm going to put a collider on it as well because, you know, obviously I need to be able to track when the player's getting hit by guns, but I will do that more once I get the enemy created and the enemy using their attacks and stuff. But our player character, he can move forward, backward, rotate right and left, and you'll see that in action. So your movement is going to be moving forward and backward and rotating along the axis so you can be able to move around the whole environment. You can jump, and then I've got the third person camera here so you can control it with your mouse or right stick as well and be able to aim at different areas within the view of the character. And I've got it clamped so it doesn't go beyond the character's viewport area sort of thing, because I don't want it to get too convoluted with the camera being looking some completely different direction. So you'll see that. I've also got it ray casting, so it will shoot at the wherever you want to shoot, actually. You'll see the red lines. Well, maybe you won't. I think I've got them taken out here. I had ray lines for debug, but I think I've taken them out because I managed to figure out the tracer system. And that will be a tracer particle that is shot so you can be able to see it shooting where you're aiming. Now, the fun thing is the raycast comes from the camera center because you want it to be shooting from where the player is seeing. But I've got the raycast or the tracer shooting from the character to where it hits or some distance that I've got set if it doesn't hit an object kind of thing. And you'll see that in action. So the tracer doesn't actually come from the camera, it comes from the character, but it always goes to where the camera is shooting. I think that turned out really well. Now, how did I do the tracer? Well, so in my resources, I've got this tracer particle system that I created. And I'll pull it out here so you can see it. Here it is. If I click and drag, you'll see it's just this little yellow line that zooms around. Let me pull it closer. So I've got it on emission, emitting over distance as opposed to over time. And that allows it to do the emission like this. As well, I've gone and, you know, lots of particles, lifetime changes, shape, color over lifetime, size over lifetime to sort of control how it looks. And as it shoots, it looks like a tracer round, just like guns in, you know, your movies, things like that in life. So I got that in there. Now, how does it work? Well, when the player here has a gun script that I've created, I've got the fire point is what I have set up here to say, okay, this is where it's going to shoot from the character. So it shoots from there, And then that gun script in it has the raycast to say, okay, shoot. If it hits a target, that's the final point. That's where the raycast ends. However, I realized that at that point, the tracer only worked if there was an actual hit on a character that could be hit. That made a problem because I needed the tracer to show all the time. So then I had to go and adjust things so if it hits, it will shoot the tracer to that point. If it doesn't hit, then I needed it to shoot the tracer to the point that the camera was looking at times a certain distance. And I think I've got that distance currently to, 100. And that will change, I guess, most likely based on what what enemy or what gun you have, things like that. It'll work out that way even more, but you'll see how that works. And then when it shoots, it's calling a separate script, which I have, which actually doesn't have to be attached to anybody per se, but I've got a script here that is for the tracer. And then that just defines where the tracer starts, the particle or game object, better said, starts, where it ends, and how long it's there. And the duration is what controls how long it's in the scene. And I've got the duration to that 0.12 here in the gun script when it sends over to the tracer. And that helps it go really fast and look more like a shot at that point. And then the gun script basically sends information over to this tracer script, and it instantiates at that point the shot. So it pulls that tracer from the resources folder here and shoots it using resources.load. And then that duration just determines how long before the tracer object is destroyed in the scene again. Because you don't want to have a bunch of tracers just growing and growing in the scene until you kill your memory or things like that. So anyway, that's kind of what we got. I'll give you a little view of how it works here now, and you can see just sort of how the gameplay has. I've got it set up so I can use mouse and keyboard or controller. Personally, I think the mouse and keyboard feels and plays a lot better for this game than the controller, but either works. It's kind of choppy because I don't have my computer plugged in right now, but it still runs all right. So you can see here I'm rotating my character. Now the character is still in the same spot, but it just rotates, and I can move it back and forth and control things here. I'll probably speed up the movement when moving backwards, just if that works better. Here I can control where I'm shot, and you see this is me shooting in that area where I've got that glider for the aggro, but it's not doing anything. However, if I aim straight at the enemy, 5 shots through it, it's dead. Now you'll also notice when I did that over here, the whole enemy class is gone. And how I did that is I basically called it to say when the child gets killed, kill the whole character. Kill the parent class too, because we don't want to have a bunch of parent classes sitting around without children. That's the sad reality of computers. If the parent dies, the child dies. I'm trying to be funny here, but anyway. But the child dies, we don't want to have that parent just sitting around because it's useless at that point. It's done. So we want the whole thing dead, and that's how I got that working there. Anyway, again, that's just sort of a little preview of what we've got here. And I'll start making this look a lot prettier, but also start getting the enemy to work the way that we need to. So let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you've got any ideas, suggestions, things like that. We love hearing from everybody. We're still starting out, very new, but we're looking forward to the progress that we're making on the projects we have on hand with Kart Racer and with this one. Going forward, we have a couple of other ideas that turned out that are pretty cool that once we get these ones sort of wrapped up, we'll start looking into some more of those other ones here. So thanks again, guys.